All right, crowdfunding, chapter 26, and I think this is, that's the last chapter, man. Crowdfunding. The most scandalous thing I ever heard about in the mission field wasn't the martyrs or the persecution found by missionaries the world over. That was expected. It wasn't the diseases to be inoculated against or the food to be reckoned with via absence of abundant toilet paper. That's a good point. It was that we used to send people used tea bags. Now, when I hear what you're thinking, Mikey, really? Like sarcastic Western churchgoer like the sarcastic Western churchgoer you very well could be, let me explain. My Oma, which means grandma in Dutch, told me this dirty little secret that the church's foreign missions when I was 10, and it has always stuck with me because I like tea. Mainly orange pico with, Earl Grey in the mornings, with toast and eggs with Oma, and tea is great. But secondhand tea is almost never good. It is slightly chalkier for some reason, less flavorful. It's not the best, and it really isn't the great reason to do something horrible to someone. Tea should be enjoyed, not tolerated, and certainly not rationed. So why do we send used tea bags to the mission field? Because the value of time and money. Time and money rule over everything online, and as the world pre-dial-up, we sent semi-used supplies to missionaries because we used the same things ourselves. New tea would be great, but used tea doubled our value, more or less, and I stress less, and it did the job. But this isn't 1950s post-war Canada where we mince our words in church committees on the ideas of how to support missionaries for less. This is 2019, and the world will be more connected than ever before the upward swing of the bell curve. Amazon can send your book via order drone, and for God's sake, we can send real tea to missionaries. Crowdfunding in this day and age is going to change how missions are done. With the internet and connection to it becoming more of a viable thing, even in the most remote places via satellite service, missionaries won't be worlds away anymore. They'll be with us, and the Skype calls that can keep us talking to the church will only become more prevalent. If so, other questions need to be asked. Do the use of global internet restricts itself to the just church that sends them as missionaries, or will those same missionaries make use of the immense amount of connectedness to fund their work? Part and parcel of the connectedness of the web are the denominations and organizations for missionaries start to lose their boundaries and control over the money involved in the mission's work. A Baptist missionary can solicit funds from anyone willing to fund them via a handful of sites and services like Patreon and GoFundMe. This circumvents the established routines and processes that have always been a part of Christian missions work in the 20th century, the same process that can be applied to physical needs. A tweet from the right connected missionary could elicit thousands of shoe donations and blankets or mosquito nets. The network allows for requests to be abundantly filled by removing the constraints of organizational distinction. Sure, there are other areas of focus like training missionaries receive or pastoral support that can just be whipped onto an app on a smartphone. But when it comes to the brass tacks, money can now come from anyone and go to anyone, regardless of the particular missions project. The framework for getting those projects up and running is already changing the way things get done via the internet. Sitcoms and movies have been funded by these sites because the fans now collectively send what they can instead of having an organization say they can't. Fox can't cancel the spirited grassroots crowdfunding of your movie of anything that gets put onto YouTube for free. The same would go for missions work, which might just lead to a dissolution of denominational ties at the end. When members from competing denominations drop the guise that there really is a difference between the thousands of denominations and non-denominations and pseudo-denominations, when half the Pentecostal church is funding a Presbyterian mission trip to dig wells in Haiti via Kickstarter, no one really cares if you're speaking in tongues or which hymns are on the board to the right of the pulpit. The internet and God's intent for it might be the only thing that can bring up the horribly fractured and petty church that Protestantism is right now, and put it back together under one banner. Like the online discipleship mentioned before, the internet allows for a congregation of individuals. The social and historical factors that divided the church don't get converted into the online experience. A sermon on the internet can speak to anyone who hears it, and a missionary seeking funding forgoes the limitations of denominational missions organizations and their forced and restricted reach in fundraising. But just like discipleship, this coin has a flip side, and a dark one too. Crowdfunding can be accomplished without oversight, much more easily than with it. Again, the meritocracy that can allow for frauds and false leaders, Christians should still be under the authority of a local church pastor. A person willing to vouch for their ability to minister, making money isn't the aim. Serving God is. This isn't that hard to do either. Any pastor worth his salt with access to decent Wi-Fi signal could post videos with the missionaries' blog or homepage to vouch for them as sending a church as a sending church without holding them as tight as to declare them a Baptist-only project. The sending and accountability can still be there without Robert's Rules of Order and committee meetings. I stress again, if they're not necessary. We can't be so trapped by our traditions that we don't see the benefit from the changing system and resources of God's resource management. Restricting our methods of funding God's work abroad might as well be the used tea bags of our day and age. When a properly supported crowdfunding campaign can go viral online, there's no reason to limit ourselves to now proclaim Jesus' name and his work via crowdfunding online. We're actually starting to see this, so I'm really glad I called that. Maybe it started happening before, but we are starting to see missionaries have GoFundMe pages and, that kind of stuff and cross collaboration. I still do think, and this is where we're going to see it happen, that this is where the dissolving of denominational ties happens, that it is through missions work and through people who are more mission minded that we start losing the distinction between Baptist and Reformed Baptist and First Baptist and Faith Baptist and all that kind of stuff. Like we're getting to a point where Christianity, I think, is going to kind of like come out of this information deluge, and we're going to be either Christian or non-Christian and not the other way, and not so fractured into, denominational splits. So final chapter coming right up. Thanks for listening.